So I want to explain a little something about the finish that I've been doing on my hive. Most of the wood you're seeing here is western red cedar, and I've treated it with tung oil, and all these pieces took the oil differently and gave it a lot of character, and I like that about it. But the exception to the western red cedar is this piece right here. It's about a 2-inch high, 2.5-inch high piece that goes all the way around, and that is made out of, well, something much whiter wood. Is I don't even know for sure. It's probably hemlock, maybe fir. I don't think it's pine, but either way, it's kind of yellow by comparison, and you see those dark spots on there. That's a little something I did to it with a blowtorch to try and give it some character, so it would just be a little bit more in line with the rest of the hive as far as appearance goes. Now this is another component of the hive that I just received, and you can see it's just a very white wood. It's not cedar. Again, I don't know if it's hemlock or fir. They don't tell you what it is. They make them out of where they can get cheap. And my ideal thing is to have it resemble the rest of the hive a little bit, as well as something that's going to preserve it. And I use tung oil. If you look down here on the inside, I did a test spot, some tung oil just in this little puddle right here, and it didn't darken the wood very much at all. Also did a little tiny bit on this cross piece here, and again, it brings out the grain just a little bit, but it's still a very yellow wood by contrast. And here's another component I worked on with a blowtorch. It's a Japanese technique called shaosoji ban. I don't speak Japanese, and I may be pronouncing that wrong, but it translates roughly, very roughly, to burnt cedar board, and it's a technique that the Japanese have been using since the 18th century to preserve wood. However, this is a very light toasting, and when in the true form you actually char the wood black and then brush off the black charcoaly surface, and the wood can last up to 80 years in the elements just from having been burnt. I'm doing a much lighter toasting here just to give some grain pop to it. And you can see I did this with a hand blowtorch. It's very difficult to get an even coat using a hand blowtorch. It's like trying to paint a wall with a small brush. A broader brush is going to give you a more even coverage. So I'm getting ready to do this box to try and make it look a little more like that box, but I would like to do a more even coat. So on the left is my little handheld blowtorch, which is what I use to do those other pieces. And on the right is a weed burning torch, 500,000 BTUs I think it's rated for. And I did a little test piece on this plank. This is hemlock, and you see that a much broader brush essentially gave me a much more even coat. So I'll go ahead and I'll film the process of doing that box, and you can watch as I do it, and we'll see how it turns out. But try and toast it just light so it highlights the grain, and then my final step after toasting it with the torch will be to rub tung oil into it, and that'll further preserve it. And it'll also darken the color, richen it a little bit, maybe make the grain stand out a little better. Nice contrast that comes out when you heat it. really highlights the grain. Take the small torch now. Darken up a little bit of this end grain. There it is. I think I am very satisfied with that. That look right there just gives it a lot more character, a lot more style. Okay, and next step is to take some quadruple 0 or 4/0 stainless steel and just give it a quick buff to remove any of the really dark charring that may have occurred, which I went pretty light, so it's not going to be very much of it. A lot lighter than sandpaper. It's the equivalent of a very light sandpaper. Clean that up real quick. See, I'm not spending much time on it. It's pretty fast. Quick and dirty is what my former employers used to say. Definitely some charcoal coming off of it, so it's nice to clean that off so it doesn't foul the brush and end up in my container of oil. I'll end up adding charcoal to pieces where I don't want it. Yeah. And now for a little tongue oil. Tongue oil is kind of fun to do. It's not like a stain. It takes a while to actually develop its actual final color, so you really don't know what you're going to get until later on. But just paint it on so that all the surfaces that you want look wet. So these parts here go across the grain to get it to come out of the brush a little faster. I'm just using a foam brush to apply this. May as well get the brush good and wet because stuff soaks in right before your eyes. Tongue oil soaks into wood like a sponge. And places I've already been with the brush already look practically dry to the eye. So we're going to put it on heavy and we'll go ahead and let it pool in places. And we'll apply a couple of coats in this first go around. And I typically only do one actual coat. Some people on day 2, they'll rub it down with some steel wool, apply another coat. Day 3, rub it down with some steel wool, apply another coat. I'm not going to do that. For me, it's one day and it's got as much treatment as I want to have for my desired effect. But depending on the wood, they'll get darker and darker with each coat. These lighter woods don't seem to darken much. They kind of tend to get more yellow with each coat, and I'm trying to avoid the yellowness, so I don't go for excessive amounts of the oil. But tongue oil, I've talked about it in other videos, very easy to apply. It's totally natural. It comes from the seed of the tongue tree, which is a Chinese tree. The Chinese invented tongue oil. It's now what they call a drying oil. It polymerizes all by itself. There's no chemicals added to make it do that. It takes about 2 weeks to actually cure, but it'll be dry in under 24 hours. It's food safe. You can use it on cutting boards, food surfaces. I like that it's food safe because that makes it animal safe. And my bees are not going to be poisoned by solvents or chemicals or anything in this. It's completely natural. And tung oil absorbs into the grain of the wood, naturally adheres to the fibers in that wood, and then polymerizes in place, essentially waterproofing the wood as well as darkening it, which really brings out the grain, gives it some character. So you can see already it's a little more vibrant than it was before I started. But the real magic happens over the next couple of hours. It will continue to change color, darken, or whatever it's going to do.
"40 minutes later."
So I'm just going to do a quick once over and remove any excess oil that might be pooled. There's not going to be much. If it is there, I'm going to leave it. You'll have a sticky spot. I don't want that. So. That's it.
And here's the final product. And you'll notice for comparison, the inside of that box is how the outside looked before I treated it. Big difference and a very easy technique. So now you know you can use fire to finish wood and give it a nice appearance. Another thing to notice is that that top box is one I just did with that large torch. The box that's sitting on top of I did with a small torch, and there's a big difference in the result. The big torch does a better job. So there you are, finishing wood with fire.